So, and we have reached the 90s. I think about the 90s, and I think about very loud music and knowing my parents in high school. But then I'm here with you, and you, Michel, you were doing your first mission in the early 90s.
92 exactly, yes.
Yes, and you, Jim, you were here already, living in the city already?
I was indeed.
As a representative for NASA.
That's correct.
And then when I think about the 90s, of course, I think that this is when the first module of the International Space Station was put in place. International Space Station is I think is a flagship project demonstrating the success of international cooperation. But then what I want to ask you is, what do you think are maybe other projects or ideas that could benefit for this kind of international cooperation that might not take place, what could not take place with only one country or one agency? Let me ask you, Jim, first.
Well, I think there are many projects. Actually, Professor Binyami gave us a very good list. Thank you, Nani. And almost all of those grand endeavors require, today, I think the reality is they require international collaboration. But I'd like to come back to something you started with, because really the era of the 90s was a very interesting era for the IF and also for some of the big programs, certainly for the space station, because in many ways it was a period of beginnings. It was the period when the partnership began to construct the station. It's the period when the partnership expanded. Our friends from Russia joined that partnership. And it was an interesting period for the IF too, because it was an era when the IF began in its first meeting in Dresden, and its last meeting in Amsterdam. That Amsterdam meeting, Philippe and his colleague Wubo Eccles started a new initiative in the IF that has grown and grown ever since. Bernd mentioned it earlier, and that was bringing young people to the Congress. And many of us who were at that Amsterdam meeting, our first reaction is this going to work? And looking back on it, we wonder why we hadn't started it decades earlier.
And since then, we have been invading your organization. I remember my first Congress was in Japan, in Fukuoka. Of course, you were there.
I was.
This is when it was implemented, the Young Professionals Program.
Yes, indeed.
So I have to thank you for that.
Well, it was an interesting program because many of the ideas that we've implemented in the IAF for our young people came from the young people. And for me, that's actually one of the most satisfying opportunities I've had as an IF volunteer, is to engage the young people and to listen to them and be challenged by them. And certainly they were anxious to have a young professionals program, so we created it.
I appreciate that, but you still have not answered my question.
Oh. Well, the ISS has it really did, I think, pave the way for many challenges and opportunities in the future. And Michel can talk about the technical achievements of the IF and the technical opportunities. I think from the cooperation standpoint, what it really demonstrated is that a group of major countries, in some cases countries that were not all that friendly in the past, have been able to work successfully together, very successfully together. And if I think of the 90s, there were periods when we really had to work at learning how to work together. It wasn't easy in those days, but that experience will apply to the great adventures of the future of going beyond low Earth orbit, and I'm sure Michel has some thoughts on that.
Well, I came in '95 to NASA because before that I flew on the space station Mir, and NASA wanted to have some experts of Russian knowledge or Mir space station, so I was there. And during the class of training, the class of escargot, I was with the NASA astronaut. A lot of instructors told us, don't believe you will fly ever on the space station. This will not work. There will never be a program between the Russian and Americans, so forget about it. You fly on the space shuttle, you will fly on the Soyuz eventually, but not on a space station. So we were doubtful. So when finally we saw the first module of the space station arriving, I was saying, well, some people was wrong, I don't know what. But finally, after 10 years, we succeeded. And ISS is a true cooperation. For instance, what we do in Europe at the European Space Agency, we do the ATV module launched by Ariane, but ATV is purely a cooperation module because the docking part of the ATV is from Russia. So we have to cooperate with Russia to dock ATV on the space station. Also, the system on ATV are coming from NASA. So ATV has 3 partners inside the ATV. So it's really a cooperation thing. And also when you look at the way we work on ISS, you need to cooperate, but to enter to a level of cooperation, you need to demonstrate what you can do. So we did the ATV to tell to the 5 partners, look, we are good. We can make an ATV, we can dock, we can make a laser docking, arriving rendezvous, which is unique and very precise. So because we are that, we recognize, and from that now, we can continue to build the step for the future cooperation to go on the moon.
But then I have just heard that the space station has been extended its lifetime to 2020.
Well, in fact, it was extended by all the partners except Europeans. So finally, last week we learned, and we had the agreement from all the partners inside the ESA to prolong the space station from 2015 to 2020.
2020, but I'm a bit always very impatient, always trying to look at what's next. And at 2020, I will be in my 40s, and we work in the same place. I would like you to tell me, what am I going to be working with after the space station is
So you will be
retired?
on your 40 in 10 years. I will be 20, because when you dream of space, you are always young. There is a big difference.
That's the point.
Well, again, ISS was for me the most, even if it is expensive, the most economical way to demonstrate a feasible cooperation in space with all the partners. This is the way to go. There was no other thing. It was maybe not the best project in terms of price and volume and size and everything. I think in the future, my point of view, and it's not ESA, it's my point of view, is we should have, after 2020, and we should start to work now already, another space station to keep something going on low Earth orbit in order to prepare the achievement to go to the moon by a moon orbit or by a transfer from the Earth orbit to the moon. So, but a much smaller space station, maybe 3 times or 4 times smaller, also international.
So you think that the mission to the moon would have to be international?
Yes, I mean definitely all missions in the future will be international. We don't fly with a flag of a country. We fly with a flag of Earth.
And Julio, in the IAF, we have many countries, some of whom are very capable in flying to space, flying humans to space. And the future of space flight, human space exploration, is certainly global human space exploration. We provide an opportunity for those countries interested in participating in such activities to speak to one another in an informal way.
To have a place to have a common dialogue.
That's right. And I should also say that Michel and I, if you're anxious what will happen in 10 years, Michel and I are even more anxious because we want to be around to see some of these things happen.
we will sit from there or from over, maybe.
Exactly.
And then I had another thing I wanted to ask you. Just 2 years ago, there were new astronauts selected, and I'm sure, well, not my generation anymore, the generation just after, the ones that still will, maybe in 10 years, participate in another selection, maybe earlier. What can you tell me of the selection process? What were the profiles you were looking for? But more than the ones that were selected, what do you think astronauts in the future will be like?
The profile of mission has been changed since the last 30 years, since Gagarin. I mean, Gagarin did a flight of 1 hour and a half, 90 minutes. Now people fly regularly and only 6 months. So all the flights are 6 months. And now we're going to have astronauts flying in the future internationally. So they have to speak many languages. They have to be able to train on all the different training centers. And they have to be ready to make a flight which is 6 months or more to go to the moon or to go to Mars. So the psychological behavior of the astronaut is a very delicate point, and we, on the last selection, we pay a very important attention on the psychological process, which is psychological behavior individually but in a team. And sometimes it's difficult because if you have a brilliant person, he is too far away from the team, and you cannot achieve a mission like this. So you need to have a group of very good people flying together and being together. So being very good everywhere, but not separated from the rest of the group. It's a difficult profile in terms of psychological.
I see your point. I think at this point, when I finished university a couple of years ago, group work was everything. It was not anymore being the first one in the class. It was working together towards a common goal. At least that's what we learned there. Talking about the next generation of astronauts, they are probably now attending the next IF via the Young Professionals program.
We hope so.
Which you had a lot to do with. What can you tell me of how is the youth going to affect IF in the future?
To me, that's one of the most exciting things about the IF because, my first Congress was in 1985 in Oslo. Some of our good friends here were with me at that occasion. And in those days, we really had very few young people. As I mentioned earlier, Philippe and Wubel Uckles began the youth program, the student program, and it's grown over the years. And today, 1/3 of the people who come to our IACs are under 35, and that's very exciting. Those people learn to deal with each other. In fact, you as a young person interested in IT, we were talking before we came in, we have to find ways to motivate the younger generation to stay in our space profession. Those of us who began years ago, it's very special to us, but there are other challenging professions. And the international is part of that. I think that the young people who are working together in the IF context in space, working internationally together, they have a very special bond. And I'll be very excited, I'm sure Michel will, to see some of the projects that you and your colleagues manage 20 and 30 years from now. You'll have a whole different relationship on how you work together.
I cannot wait to get there. So cheers to that.
Cheers. A drink to that too. Beautiful.